He's like one of my secret bugaboos. You'll notice I'm usually wearing a button-down shirt, and most of the time I'm wearing a jacket when I do an appearance. Every minute I'm on there, I'm selling my lawyering. So I should look a little bit like people think a lawyer should look like. That was one thing that struck me about the black Muslims, the Nation of Islam, is they teach their guys, why not look like $1 million?
Do you think a solution to some of this ridiculousness is dressing like a grown-up?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of the things that we see people do, they wouldn't dream of doing, either because they would feel silly because they would recognize that they're acting out of place, but also good self-regard that comes, the healthy self-regard that comes from looking like a mensch and dressing like a mensch is contagious to your entire psyche.
I do act differently when I'm wearing a suit, I feel like.
Think about it.
All interviewers have their own style, and my style is to try to get to the point and to be intensely curious. And the key to interviewing is listening.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth, because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to our Sunday sit-down and episode 600. That seems like a lot. My daughter just asked me that this morning. How many of these shows have you done? I said, I don't know, but like over 500. We're at 600 today. So thanks for joining us for the 600th episode, Kyle Seraphin Show, as we've settled into this format of doing Sunday sit-downs, and that's what this is. It's going to be a profile on kind of the state of affairs. It's actually a great, fun little chat. I went back and edited and was listening to it, and I thought, doggone it, I would sit and listen to this all again. And I was there when we recorded it. So it's a little bit of a couple days old at this point, but we're going to be talking to Ron Coleman. He is an attorney. He's argued in front of the Supreme Court. He works for the Dillon Law Firm. He's also a social media personality and a podcaster, and just an all-around interesting, nice guy, and he makes me laugh. He's very bright. It's nice to talk to smart people. I think my dad told me that one time. It is nice to talk to smart people. It's nice when people have a different sense of humor that also kind of tickles your funny bone. So I think you guys are going to enjoy this conversation. It's not super heavy. We cover some pretty broad-ranging topics, and I walked away thinking about things that I wasn't thinking about previously. So I think you might as well. Before we get started with the program, we're going to say thanks to the folks that sponsored this program. Today's sponsor, as we do just a single commercial interruption, is for the folks over at My Patriot Supply. They've got a 4th of July sale going on. Being free means being ready. So we'll just encourage you to check them out at mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. Folks, you can look at the headlines. They're always getting crazier. Today's a little day where we can take a moment away for them. But I'll just remind you, we've got a little bit of an unstable situation in the Middle East. There's questions about sleeper cells and terrorist attacks in the United States, the looming threat of nuclear proliferation, whether it be serious or otherwise. A buddy of mine told me that the ATF is just days away from a nuclear weapon. I'm joking, of course. Nobody knows what's coming next, though. That's something we can all agree on, and that's not funny. If you want to be clear, when a crisis hits, that is not a good time to prepare. That's time for you to repair. If you guys want to get ready in advance, you may want to check out the Independence Day Preparedness Bundle. It's available right now from My Patriot Supply. It is a massive option with a 1-year emergency food supply for an adult. They're throwing in over $1,200 in free survival gear. You guys probably know this, but I'm a gear guy. We just powered the entire set and studio with one of the new grid doctors. If you want a full year of food and solar power backup and water filtration and everything you need to ride out whatever's coming your way, check out one monster option. Buy once, cry once. Just bite the bullet and get it done at mypatriotsupply.com/KYLE. Again, mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. It's more than a great deal. It might be the last best chance to get your house in order. You actually never know what's coming your way. Don't do fear mongering, but I do like to feel like I've got things under control, and this is one way you can do it. Again, check out this special offer. Not going to last long at mypatriotsupply.com/Kyle. Get yourself squared away right now. Let's do this conversation with Mr. Ron Coleman. Let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest today is Ron Coleman. He's one of my favorite people, even if he doesn't know it. And he sort of insinuated himself onto today's program by asking if he was going to be on today's program. So here he is. Hello, Ron Coleman.
How you doing?
I'm really well. How are you doing?
I'm all right, thank you. It wasn't necessarily a today's program thing, but then I should have realized you don't really have anyone else coming on. So if I say I'd like to be on the show again, Kyle, because it's been a while, I should have realized that for you, that means, wow, I've got someone for tomorrow.
Well, I don't want to blow your mind, but I've been doing these interviews on Sundays, and so you're like a couple weeks out now from today. So that's we're stocking in, we're filling our cup.
Well, I got to say that I'm impressed with that kind of having that kind of stock as a podcaster myself. It's hard keeping interviews that long because sometimes they become untimely, unless you're talking about like Renaissance literature.
I think that's probably what we're going to end up talking about today. Actually, I felt like what we would talk about today is the status of the First Amendment in this country, because I think speech is always important, and we're kind of at an interesting time. So you actually opined on a post that I made where I had an issue with the White House press secretary calling out a reporter from her official Twitter account. And when you and I do a lot on Twitter. So that's what I thought might be kind of an interesting discussion. And I think it'll also maybe get bigger. Like maybe we should burn down cities if we're unhappy with what's being said, or what other fun things are out there. And maybe we can find out if it's the Jews that are responsible for all the bad things, because I keep getting told that I'm getting paid by the Jews. And someone said I got to come to you to get the paycheck. So I think we got like plenty to talk about. It's always going to be timely.
Especially, look, there's always time to talk about the Jews.
Why? Hold on. Let's just go straight there for 1 second. What about this time? Because I don't remember a time in my life when it was so easy for people to jump up and insinuate that it is the Jews. And I like to spell Jews with O's that get bigger and smaller for a lot of them.
Yeah, I don't quite understand like that. The spelling of the Jews thing got old for me very, very fast. I will be quite honest with you. But in terms of your essential question, it's social media. It's social media, and it was never, there has never been as little gatekeeping on public expression as there is now. And although it is true that there are forces that from the outside and some from the inside that are using anti-Semitism as a weapon to divide us, clearly. Mm-hmm. It's also the case that there have always been numbers of lunatics who have historically, or malcontents, miscreants, who have historically not been able to get their voice out there because nobody with any valuable sort of outlet would let them do so. Now, every man is his own publisher, and there are many, many terrific things about that, because gatekeeping really is hard to justify in an age when there's no capital investment required to broadcast something. But what we get is a picture of what has probably, to a significant extent, been flowing beneath our very feet for much longer than we want to realize.
You think there's always been an amount of bigotry, and there just hasn't been a means to distribute it as much?
Of course. Of course. I don't think that anyone doubts that. All kinds of bigotry, all kinds of resentment, all kinds of jealousy, all kinds of generalized observations about groups of people that may very well have validity. Mm-hmm. That even historically, you really still in the mainstream press and in the academy are not allowed to publish or teach or even really talk about intellectual intelligence differences among different populations of people. And you can't really scientifically say race. There really aren't races. There's no genetic difference. There are differences in features and in geography. But nonetheless, we know there are, generally speaking, there's such a thing as white people, black people, Asian people, many different kinds of Asian people. I mean,
I think they're all different flavors of Chinese. Are you saying otherwise?
I think I am.
Okay. I like asking Asian people what flavor of Chinese they are, because really good spirited people will always laugh at that, and people that are maybe a little bit punchy about it tend to be very upset about it. But I like to be irreverent, as I think you do. Sometimes it's just fun to say that.
But you also like to be dark and irreverent.
Yes.
Including in your studio.
Yes.
Can we get a little bit more light on you, or is this part of your deep cover now?
I want to put the light on the subject of who I'm talking to, so it's less about me. I don't know.
Oh, is that what it is?
Is that stylistic? Also, I've just moved my lighting, so it's possible that I need to turn that one up. It's now further away. It used to be a glowing orb in my eyeballs, so this is a little bit easier for me to watch.
Well, actually, I just always forget. I'm supposed to buffer down my shine here.
Oh, I thought it looked nice.
Well, it throws off the meter a little bit, I mean, Harmeet taught me that I have to. Here we go.
Oh, quite good. Yeah.
See, just a little bit there.
This is a Harmeet trick.
Well, I mean, I don't think she has the problem in quite the same location.
Agreed. Yes.
But she is arguably, speaking of our favorite topic, crime and punishment, right? And the FBI and the Department of Justice. She is arguably the one person you can say who has come into DOJ who is making differences on the ground immediately.
I agree.
And to a large extent, her success backs up your hypothesis that the people we have been looking to for big changes at FBI don't seem to be prepared to implement them.
Time is of the essence, one would think.
You would think, although when it comes to, one thing I will say, when people talk about arrests and indictments, I expect that to take long. That takes a long time.
Sure.
That takes a long time. The fact that the Democrats wasted no time arresting people for J6, but yeah, they didn't, but that was just what the mafia does. I mean, that was basically just an organized crime action under the color of law. So that doesn't impress me at all. In fact, it depresses me. But on the other hand,
did you say it depresses you?
Well, I mean,
that was nice.
Does Ron Coleman ever really look deeper? You know what though? Speaking of depressed, did you see that video? An AI video that someone did a few days, maybe it was a week ago, yeah, about showing Trump and Musk after their breakup. It is so good, and the brilliance of it is, like, it shows them like going through their separate lives, but their hearts are like
something is missing.
They keep thinking of each other, okay? And it was the most compelling depiction of brokenhearted males.
I think they're going to get back together.
Well, apparently they're playing nice on X now. I just saw a heart from Musk. I mean, one or both of them was off their meds or on his meds.
Yes.
That was a crazy incident. But I despair. I got us a little bit further off topic because we had an important thing to talk about, which is, so we were talking about. I had made a comment. Yes, your original point was the government. Miss Leavitt, is that her name?
Yes, Carolyn Leavitt.
She demanded to know, is NBC was it ABC or NBC?
It was ABC.
ABC. What are you going to do about this guy?
Right.
He said, and it was all kinds of shit talk that he was doing.
Yeah, he was.
And it was ugly. It was nasty.
It was nasty, but it wasn't
violent,
profane.
It wasn't threatening.
It wasn't professional, but it wasn't profane, and it wasn't professional. I agree with that. It was just sort of like what people who are having a bad day might say.
And it's what we know 90% of them are thinking almost all the time.
Yeah, I agree.
And so there are definitely two sides to this. On the one hand, she's absolutely entitled to squeeze ABC for what it's worth. This is what they call in economics, right? Moral suasion. When the Fed gets the banks together and say, "Listen, I don't want to change the discount rate, but I need you guys to work with me. I need you. So, but the way it came across, I think you and I both agree, was as if some sort of law had been broken, or some sort of more than a social decency protocol, but that ABC was in danger of losing some kind of right or privilege. Now, the Supreme Court just held that the White House can, in fact, not the Supreme Court, I'm sorry, it was the D.C. Circuit of all places.
Okay.
Said, no, the White House can kick people out of the press room for no reason or any reason, including stupid reasons like the Gulf of America. That's actually no organization or person has a First Amendment right to a privileged seat in the press room.
Okay, so that's what what was that decision that just came out?
I think it was. I mean, I saw it on. I heard about it through Robert Govia.
Okay. But is that something, and then is the news organization, are they appealing that all the way if they can?
Well, they've now, so what happened was the decision, it was an emergency appeal to the federal circuit,
Yep.
not the federal circuit, the DC circuit,
right,
which reversed the district court. If it's going to go to the Supreme Court, they are not going to consider it, in my humble opinion, on an emergency.
Will they be able to take it to like an en-banc or a panel review at all?
They could. So you're saying this might not be the last word on this matter. I think it's a very sound decision, though.
Okay.
But that has nothing to do with the DC circuit.
No, that doesn't have anything to do with anything, it turns out, in our courts at this point. But I think what we're saying is that there at least has been a decision, and the decision is that you have no right to access, which is kind of what the White House spokesperson was saying, or the press secretary rather. She kind of alluded to, you were in danger of losing access, and you're saying that the courts have said, yeah, you don't have a right to access.
Yeah, and there's something to be said for saying, if we understand that we are political adversaries, we get that, no surprise here, but if you're going to be over the top nasty, just like I wouldn't expect to be granting access to the Sturmer or the Daily Worker, or in other words, people who are just whose outlets or who themselves are just simply too obnoxious to be tolerated. We're not going to do it. And we're going to kick you out. And I mean, I don't understand how anyone could ever have really seriously argued that any organization or person has a right to a privileged location in the press office. So apparently that tweet was deleted.
Yes.
And it went more or less as it should. And listen, I also don't have a real problem with the Trump administration or its personnel, the administration, flexing its muscles where it can, especially given how assiduously other branches of government, especially the judiciary, has acted to clip its wings in so many respects. So, politically speaking, in terms of barefisted political brawling, it's fine. I don't really, but I do think you and I had the same impression when we read it, which was that it just came across a little bit heavy-handed.
Yeah, I guess the question is it good for America, whether or not you're allowed to do it, that you do things like that? In other words, is it something that you should do even if you can do it?
I think the answer is it's the kind of thing you should do. I think her email was a very long email. Not her email, her post.
I like to think that she was emailing us directly. I like that.
It was very much like an email. But first of all, I don't like very long emails either.
Yeah.
I think that she could have made the point a lot faster. This is a little bit kind of the problem that President Trump himself often has in his posts. Just when you think that you read the first couple sentences and yeah, I think you might be onto something there, President Trump. But then
right until you talk yourself out of it.
Then he talks you out of it because he starts with the capital letters and the, brevity really is the soul of wit, Kyle.
It is, and you know what? I think that goes to the earliest point you made, is that the low bar of entry of any man being his own publisher, you know what you don't have when you're self-publishing usually is a good editor.
That is very true. And because I'm hearing this all the time from my brilliant and lovely wife, Jane Coleman, who writes for Legal Insurrection and who edits herself, the occasional late night involuntary assistance of her lawyer, writer, and podcaster husband, but who so assiduously edits herself. She's like just this crazy, like I'm a shoot from the hip guy.
But you're also very brief when you shoot from the hip.
Well, I do tend to I do think I did boil things down as a general rule, and so does Jane. But her getting there is such a grind, and is. But she's always telling me when she reads other people's stuff, no one's editing anything anymore. And that also includes books that come in hardcover from publishing houses because traditional media are competing with the free media. The margins, in order for them to compete financially or economically, the features there's less and less attention being paid to editing, and you don't see things like indexes in books anymore either.
No, I think they're trying to tighten that tooth to tail ratio. That's what the military would call it.
Tooth to tail ratio.
You like that? The tail being everything behind, but the tooth being what actually bites you, which is the print itself. And editing always seems to suffer. Let me give you the I think his name was Terry Morin. Does that sound right? And Carolyn Levitt. Let me give you a alternative world scenario where I think you might agree with me. Imagine Terry of ABC News writes his unhinged tweet, and it's not pleasant, not professional, but not profane, as we said. It's certainly not the worst or nastiest thing that we've read this week because we spend time on social media.
In other words, it's high normal.
It's anything that Rachel Maddow would have normally read on her evening newscast thing that she does.
Got it.
Okay, so it's ugly. And the White House press, physically and also to the ear. And so I said it. I'll own that. And so the White House press secretary says, we really hope that ABC considers professional standards for their journalists in future. Boop. And everybody knows what she meant. And then Peter Doocy probably shows up at the next press secretary briefing because he's known to be helpful in that way. And then he says, press secretary, we've noticed that Terry Morin had this tweet, and then he deleted it, and he had these sort of nasty things to say about Stephen Miller. What is the White House's position about people from ABC having nasty tweets about Stephen Miller? And she just says, we hope that journalists in America are striving for truth and giving the American people information. We've seen, obviously, that hasn't happened in the last couple of years. We hope that they continue to do better. And we stand by his decision to delete that tweet. I think it was probably the right move. We hope that moves the discourse forward. That's the White House statement. Doesn't have to be any more than that. He's been slapped, as we would say in the military, slapped on the pee-pee as necessary. And everybody knows that they're the adults in the room. And America's no worse off. Is that good or not good?
I'm going to say that you're watering it down a little bit too much.
Too much? Does it need to be more aggressive?
Because what you've just given me in terms of the exchange is a rather muddled, vague, bureaucratish kind of speak that doesn't tell us, especially those of us who are not in the loop. Here's the thing.
There needs to be exposition to the problem in the answer.
I think there has to be some exposition because, right, you got to help these people who are actually following these people and reading their stuff and know what's going on. But we normal people have no idea. So
you're not in the normal people. You're in the highly informed people.
I'm the highly informed people on certain things, but on what journalists say about President Trump, I'm like, isn't that usually on Blue Sky anyway? Aren't they mostly right? So
I suppose so. Is there a lot of anti-Semitism on Blue Sky?
Is there?
I don't know. Do you hear that?
I don't know. I mean, they just I applied and they said it's not anti-Semitism, Ron, but we do judge a man by the size of his nose and how much he talks with his hands. So
you're
I'm not aware of any no. I mean, seriously, I understand it's a highly filtered environment.
Yeah.
And anyone they regard as a Nazi, including a Semite such as myself, is not allowed to participate in the discussion. From what I understand, the oxygen is being so rapidly drained out of that room that they're all going to be pretty much, sniffing their way along the linoleum pretty soon in a desperate attempt to, retain consciousness. So I don't really know what's going on in Blue Sky. Among the things that I always wish I had time to do, like why go join up on Blue Sky just to get it kicked off immediately, even if that's a waste of time. Uh-huh. I will tell you one secret desire that I had. I don't have the time, and I'm not even sure I have the inclination, but there's a part of me that does, to do a parody account. There's so many potential parody accounts. Mm-hmm. And I think we've lost a number of them. I don't think we have the parody accounts that we used to.
They all end up getting big enough that people follow them, and then they start taking themselves seriously. Which
yes, that's true. They step out of character, mm-hmm. and plus they're eventually doxxed, inevitably, and then they take on their new identity. By the way, have you seen any of the stuff about Pope Hat? About what an utterly crazed lunatic.
Who is this?
Ken White. Doesn't ring any bells with you?
No.
He was a very prominent, he's still a prominent blogger if anyone pays attention to blogs. Most blogs are not getting a lot of attention. But his blog was called Pope Hat. And I worked on him with him on many, many things. And he was a conservative libertarian.
Okay.
Who Trump simply absolutely snapped in half like a reedy Southern California droughty twig, okay? And he's so Trump deranged. I mean, he left Blue Sky after he left Twitter after Elon bought it. He's been on Blue Sky. He has a whole cult around. He's a brilliant writer. Mm-hmm. He seems to be a very good lawyer. He lost some big ones, but I've lost some big ones. But he really cut off all his friends, everyone who we considered to be insufficiently anti-Trump or much less pro-Trump. But if you don't know the guy, we're just...
No, but that does say that there's a lot of really bright people that seem to have really lost their minds, like people that I would otherwise respect in other venues. And then the minute that something comes up, why is there such an emotional reaction to Donald Trump?
Well, and here's a related question.
I still have that question. I don't know, because I don't feel emotional about the guy at all. I just don't.
Emotional. I myself have been devoid of emotions for a very, very long time. So I can't. But the DC Circuit has actually issued a number of moderately reasonable stays and decisions in favor of the Trump administration. Mm-hmm. And yet, when it comes to anything involving J6, they're absolutely out of their minds.
Yeah.
So, and most of them are bright people. Mm-hmm. So there's it's the nature of woke virus infection that different patients are affected differently. And sometimes they lose it all, but sometimes they only lose portions of their rationality. And it seems that in the DC courts, everyone took a blood oath that anyone involved in or suspected of approving anything that happened on January 6th must be hounded and prosecuted and persecuted to the fullest possible extent. But to a very large extent, and there have been, unfortunately, far too many exceptions to this, they've kind of gone back to doing their jobs, it seems, and sometimes coming out with some reasonable opinions. Unlike, say, the First Circuit. I now say the First is the worst.
What area is covered by the First Circuit?
First Circuit is New England.
Okay.
And it is, it's pretty much there's a judge in Boston who has just become the go-to judge for injunctions against anything Trump does. And the First Circuit has upheld almost every one of them. And I will tell you that I'm a member of all the circuit courts in the country. Mm-hmm. Whenever I get involved in a case involving the First Circuit, I'm pretty confident it's a waste of time. In other words, why would you come to a guy in New Jersey for a circuit case, for First Circuit case? Because Mark Randazza doesn't have time for you, or you can't afford him or something. And the point is, usually it's an issue. It's a political case or free speech case, and they're just so ideologically shaked and baked there. I mean, the thing is, the Ninth Circuit, which was historical, California,
sure,
Washington, Oregon, famous for being the most frequently reversed circuit, has been reversed a lot less than in previous years, partly because you can pull some very decent panels in the Ninth Circuit. Trump did put quite a few people onto the Ninth Circuit in his first go round. So there are some panels that are decent. There's some that are still absolute crud, and when they go en banc, you can't expect much from them. But the First Circuit is consistently bad. I think probably there were not a lot of Republican appointees there at all. So, I'm boring myself with this.
No, you're fair. That leads me to something. My wife grew up in your neck of the woods. She grew up in Brooklyn and was born in Manhattan. And she said something to me that has stuck with me. She said it to me about a week and a half ago, and I keep hearing it in my head. She said, "There's no such thing as a happy communist." What do you think about that?
Not a truly happy communist. I mean, in other words, a communist can be happy because right now he has his boot on the neck of an Estonian that he has absorbed into his empire, right? But as soon as he shoots all the local Estonians and Estonian party leaders and sets up his own people, he immediately starts assuming that the ones that he has put into place are plotting against him. But I mean, in a more broad sense, which is, I think, what your wife was getting at.
Yeah, I think she was talking about Bostonians and New Yorkers and the people that we see in New England, Connecticut that just seem miserable.
They are. They really are. They can't be happy. There's always a problem. There's always I'll never forget, there was a Woody Allen movie a gazillion years ago. My God, well over 40 years ago. It might have been Manhattan. And we see in his living room that he has on one of the walls a gigantic blown up mural of that famous picture from the Vietnam War of the North Vietnamese guy shooting a Viet Cong prisoner, just like point blank, right next to him. You've seen that picture a million times.
Yeah, sure. Time life picture type thing.
And at one point, he might have even been standing in front of that picture. He says, I can't go to sleep at night as long as I know something in the world is some kind of injustice is going. It was something stupid like that, and I was an adolescent when I saw this, and I wasn't particularly political, but I remember thinking, what?
Yeah,
is that? I mean, but who the hell are you?
And what are you going to do about it?
Right. I mean, in your rent-controlled apartment, there, it's so much, and and what it really is, it's a form of incredible moral vanity. With as you point out, very, very little skin in the game. They don't give up their club memberships. They don't give up there are a handful of social justice warriors who have walked the walk as well as talking the talk. I always think of Ralph Nader, who took these ridiculously low salaries, even though he had created and was the head of Consumers Union, I think it was, which is a different kind of bullshit altogether. I mean, I don't think people who are heads of nonprofits should be making multi-million-dollar salaries unless they can justify return on investment that way. It might be possible, but this idea that you're going to, live on ramen noodles in order to prove your what do they call it?
The nobility of poverty kind of ethos.
It's all performative. It's performative. And sometimes it can be performative just to yourself. But listen, are we being any happier by sitting here and kvetching about them?
I think we might be. I'm having a good time.
I think you're right.
Yeah, I knew a gal in college who I think she had it tattooed on a forearm or something, and it said "the vanity and virtue." And I've always thought that to be very clever.
The vanity in virtue?
Yeah, people who take who are vain in their virtues, and they sort of carry them around and parade them, and there's some Christian scripture about this, just talking about the people who go out there and let everybody know that they are now suffering and that they are fasting or they are giving alms, and they do so, and their reward is given out in public, and that is the public acknowledges what a great person you are for doing that thing. Well, but there's no real value to God, is what the claim is.
Well, so that's actually a controversial issue in Christian theology. I'm actually 2/3 of the way through a book by my professor at college, Peter Brown, the esteemed historian of medieval and antiquity, eras of antiquity and the medieval periods in Europe, where it's called Through the Eye of a Needle, and he examines the question of how the church in its early era metamorphosed its views, and how there were different parties within the church, Augustine being one, but not the only voice. Different ideas within Christianity of how do we deal with wealth, and some of what the church taught about wealth echoed its Jewish origins, and some of it said, no, actually, one of the things that Jesus rebelled against, the hypocrites in the synagogues, the people who wanted you to know what they were giving. And by the way, there's conflict in rabbinical literature as well, which Jesus would have probably been familiar with as a rabbinical student. On the one hand, we say that the highest form of charity is charity that's given secretly as opposed to publicly. And on the other hand, one of the traditional ways of lampooning Jewish affluence is how if you go into a synagogue or other Jewish institution, everything has a plaque on it that says who donated it.
That's right, yeah. And
I remember when I was hit up for money by a rabbinical leader, I challenged him with this, and he said, both are true, because when people see that their friend Ron Coleman gave the money for this, they say, oh, if Ron can do it, I can do it. Or, oh, Ron's endorsing it. That's a guy that I like. He's making a commitment. So there's
a social value to that in the social pressure that it applies for everyone to do well and do better.
And then there's also an argument that it gives glory to God to put your name on the list of people who are giving for his side. But, all right, these are complicated issues, and who are Ron and Kyle to judge, after all?
Just two guys. I'm more curious, what caused you to read this book about, Christian theology changing and the handling of wealth in the early church? That sounds like an interesting thing. What caused you to go and read this?
Anything Peter Brown writes is interesting.
Okay.
He was just such a great professor, and I was just looking at, hadn't realized how long after I graduated, which was 40 years ago, because I actually attended a little sliver of my class reunion a couple weeks ago, how active he had remained as a scholar. So I just, because in the process of answering this question, he goes through history of the Western Roman the Western Roman Empire and what's happening in Italy. And I happen to be an aficionado of culture, of European history, and I'm particularly interested in the period that he teaches about. So, that's just, I'm a man of many parts, some of which are not suitable for public display, but that's one of them. I'm an intellectual. I can't sleep at night if I know there's an unanswered question.
That's exactly it. The hubris to think that your awareness of injustice somehow changes the way the scales work. I love it. It is a thing. Listen, my father-in-law is from your neck of the woods as well, and was born in Manhattan. And I remember him saying something one time that was one of the funniest things. I'd never contemplated the thought. Someone's like introduce. You're like, there's people out there that think that way. I've just met one. I cannot now not know that. We were driving in a car. He looked over and saw a black man walking on the streets of Brooklyn. And that's all the information I have about this guy. I don't remember what he was wearing, but it wasn't remarkable.
Wait. Before you go any further, do you know about what decade this took place during?
Oh, yeah, sure. This was in the 2010-ish to 2012, 2015, something like that. Somewhere in that range. Yeah, so somewhere in the 2010s. And we were on, what is the Nets stadium on, or their thing? Is it on? Is that Atlantic?
Yeah, it might be. It's very close to Flatbush Avenue.
Okay, I think it was on Flatbush, if my memory serves. We were like on Flatbush, which is not too far from where she was. She was in that area, Borum Hill or Park Slope or whatever. So we're driving in a car, and he looks over and sees a black man. No further information about this man. Nothing remarkable. And we were having some sort of discussion about opportunity in America, because that's what communists like to talk about, and injustice. And he looked over at a guy that we knew nothing about, nothing whatsoever. And he said, "Look at that man. There's no opportunity for him here in this country." And I thought, what? How do you know? What would cause you to think this strange thought? I'd never once considered whether or not there was opportunity for a stranger that I saw in America. It never even occurred to me.
And this was within sight of the Nets.
Yeah.
Okay, where
walking distance for sure. Yeah, sure, like a relatively reasonable New York walk to it.
A building in which you can find dozens of black men who are multi-gazillionaires.
Mm-hmm. Yes. I also assure you that there are black property owners and black men who are doing developing in that area.
Yes, absolutely.
There's no question in my mind that there are construction contracts that are being executed by black-owned companies, that there are law firms run by black attorneys within that area. There's probably some record labels. There's probably some shops and businesses of all different varieties within walking distance of that man who, by the look of him, had no opportunity in America.
In other words, the guy was down and out.
No, he was just a guy. He was wearing normal people clothes. He didn't look like a homeless person. He was unremarkable. He was a person. He was a pedestrian in New York.
So your father-in-law is he's an old line lefty. Is that what it is?
Yeah, I think so. I think that at one point in time, he told me that he didn't think that people should be able to own private property, and that it certainly shouldn't pass from one person to another. Things like that. Now, you can imagine what he made his living doing, right? I mean, that's pretty obvious. He was a real estate agent.
An envious real estate agent.
I just don't know. Like I said, my wife is very well educated in certain things that I have no experience with, and when she told me that there's no such thing as a happy communist, it really stuck with me.
Well, I have the impression then that she saw quite a few of them up close and personal in her time.
Kind of the experience maybe that you had, obviously different generation, but she grew up in that area, and we talked about it previously, and I'll recommend people go back and listen to the first time we sat and chat where you kind of told me how you came up. But Yeah, she went from being a person who was very strong on the left and very much in the culture of the world that you have to tread around in, and she's a pretty conservative person now, and she wears a veil on her hair when she goes to mass, and if we could find a Latin mass, we'd go to it, and she converted
Really?
out of
Really?
out of nowhere.
I didn't know that was a thing. I mean, I knew it was a thing conceptually. People don't understand that Muslims and Jewish women who cover their hair are not unique in this regard. In the old world, any married woman would cover her hair as a matter of modesty.
A modesty, exactly. Yeah, no, it's actually getting more and more common, I think, in young Catholics as well.
And let me ask you guys, how do you dress when you go to mass?
I dress appropriate for the area. So we live out in we're right on the edge of farm country and some kind of like central Texas hill country type stuff. So people show up.
If you came in a suit and tie, you would look weird.
I would look like I'm trying to do something that other people do not. Yeah. So I wear slacks or jeans, usually dark colored jeans. I wear shoes that are clean. I wear a button-down shirt. I also carry a gun to church. I just feel like that's my duty, just as my capability. So I kind of have an eye on that. And I also have kids that drool on me because my little ones are small. So we're doing that. But yeah, I don't dress in a dark suit. But if I was in a place where that was not pretentious, I wouldn't think twice about it.
Do you remember when you were a child how people dressed for church?
Yes, but I also spent time in Texas and California, which are kind of...
We're always ahead of the curve on dressing.
On a lot of things. Yeah, I would think so too. So my father often wore slacks, polo shirt, maybe a button-down shirt, but not often a tie unless it was an event. So we were outside of maybe the more traditional, more conservative, modest thing. And some of that is spinning back in this country. I think there's a backlash against modernism in a lot of places.
Well, to a large, I'm a little bit of it's like one of my secret bugaboos. You'll notice I'm usually wearing a button-down shirt and frequently, most of the time, wearing a jacket.
Yes.
When I do an appearance. And part of that is because I'm trying to project if I'm going to rationalize to Mrs. Coleman, why do I spend so much time on people's podcasts? And I say, well, I'm every minute I'm on there, I'm selling my lawyering. So I should look a little bit like people think a lawyer should look like. But, in our Orthodox Jewish community, in ours, not in all of them,
yes,
dress down culture is not a thing, or it's only a thing among certain guys. I mean, my sons and I, like on a Sunday, my sons and I are all wearing white shirts and dark suits. Oh, they're not ties necessarily, usually not. And on the Sabbath and holidays, when we go to synagogue, we're wearing suits and ties and hats. And I recognize, but that's a statement in and of itself. I remember that was one thing that struck me about the black Muslims, the Nation of Islam, is they teach their guys, why not look like $1 million? We're going to rebuild your self-respect, and a good way to do that would be for us to you to look great. And here's the thing: everyone looks better dressed nicely. Everyone.
That's true.
And the irony is, it's never been less expensive to dress nicely. 100 years ago, even 50 years ago, garments, textiles were things that people made, and they were expensive, and you'd recycle clothing and you do hand-me-downs. Today's young people don't want hand-me-downs from their parents that they've saved. Like, nothing is cheaper than a schmata. Nothing is cheaper than a garment. They're all made by third world people. It is garbage. It's really, everything's so
it's disposable too. It's not like you're going to hem it, repair it, or patch it and make it stay.
But you could go to Target and get a suit. It might not last you 5 years, but you could look, if you had to, you could look like $1 million, at least for 6 months to a year in that suit. And then so it's not even a class statement. It's not like, oh, that's what fancy people look like, but I can't afford that. It's within our reach, but the call of laziness and slovenliness, the siren song, it's just so. it's just so prevalent that there doesn't seem to be any way to unless you're an incredibly influential opinion and thought leader like Ron Coleman, and everyone says, hey, how does Ron Coleman always look great for an old guy?
It's not an accident, is what you're saying.
It's not an accident. But I used to like to shop. I don't get to shop anymore because I don't.
You used to like to shop. Hold on. Let's just explore that for a second. You used to like to shop. Yeah, because I like clothes. I do like to look. I like to choose my clothes. I like to be in style. Uh-huh. And I would love to have a reason to buy myself, especially if I have a good month, right? I got a few extra bucks sitting around. I maybe would like to buy myself a nice suit. Who's appreciating a nice suit anymore? Yeah, maybe that's the other piece of it too. People don't care as much. I see the same thing in my old profession. There was a departure from people showing up in a suit and a tie. That was the expectation when I was in Washington, D.C. If you were going to go do an interview, particularly in a very professional sort of job like I used to have when you were doing counterintelligence investigations, you were dealing with counterintelligence type people. And these are government employees and folks who have money and influence. And
that's interesting because even now, tanks. I noticed that Washington is one of the few cities you can go to where you will still see people dressed as adults on the street, walking the streets, because in most government jobs, evidently you still have to, put on your work togs.
Yeah, your grown-up clothes. Listen, that was the only money I spent when I was at the FBI Academy was on some new shirts from Brooke Brothers. I bought 5 new dress shirts. It's the only money I spent when I was there for 5 months. I paid off my wife's student loan debts. We paid them off, and
imagine.
And yeah, go figure that. And I responsibly bought myself some dress shirts, which I still own today because they were so well made that you can still wear them. It turns out I have this buy once, cry once mentality. If you buy nicer things occasionally, as long as you buy them for quality and not for name, they actually do last. You want to hear something funny that's kind of it's bothering me right now since we're talking about clothing, and I didn't know we were going to talk about this. I have the tuxedo, Ron, that I wore to my junior prom in 1998.
And you son of a bitch, can probably fit into it.
I can fit into it, but the style is not right. And my wife has let me know. In fact, I probably look better in it today, if we're being honest, because 1998 Kyle was 125 pounds.
Yeah, I was about to. You must have been a string bean.
and today Kyle is about 175 pounds. So there's 50 pounds more Kyle. And, it's mostly in places where you expect men to develop, in like leg muscles and arms and just chest and just being a bigger person.
That is wild.
I'm the same height, though, as I have been since I was in 8th grade.
So you hit it, you got there fast, and then
I didn't get there fast either. I was not tall then, even for the age, and then I just continued to be not tall for the rest of my life.
Oh, how tall are you?
5'8".
Oh yeah, you're a little shrimp, aren't you?
That's it. says no one to me, generally, to my face, but online that is a classic. It's like, listen, I've been this way for a long time.
I'm more of a Jesse Kelly fan.
He's tall.
I've seen him standing next to some pictures of some tiny little women, and he looks like the Jolly Green Giant.
Yeah, he's freakishly tall. So is Sebastian Gorka.
He's big, Sean Parnell's big.
There's a couple of them.
Yeah, a lot of these people, you meet them in person, and so when I was a kid, I would go to these, family weddings and whatnot, bar mitzvahs, and my grandparents' generation was still alive, and they all grew up in Eastern Europe and were all suffered from malnutrition as children. So they were all 5'1", 5'2". So I would go. I'm a 5'10", 14-year-old, and the sea of bald heads, at sternum level. And then I got to college, and there are all these corn-fed Gentiles there, and all of a sudden I'm the guy sneaking under people's armpits to look at the grades that are posted. And I said, but perspective is a heck of a thing.
It is. It's important.
It could be important.
All right, let's meander our way back towards this First Amendment thing, which I think is relevant in so much as our country. It sounds like I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I feel like we need to have healthy dissent, including allowing people to say some really, really ugly things, which we started off talking about. But there's obviously a line. Some people don't know where that line is. Just like they don't know how to dress, they seem not to know where the line is, and they are executing it all over this country. Go ahead.
All right, so let's examine what you just said. We should have, who's we? We in the society. Americans in America,
yes.
In the free air, in the park, on the soapbox. Now, how about on your social media platform? You say, same thing, Ron. To which I say, hold on a second. If some guy is shouting expletives or hateful things or insulting things on a soapbox in Hyde Park or Military Park outside my building here, I don't have to hang around and listen to him. I can go somewhere else. But if I'm on Twitter and every time I make a comment about Israel, I get flooded with replies from people wishing I had been killed in the Holocaust, people making fun of the size of my nose, people asking me what was my last name originally, which I don't know what it was. In other words, but really obnoxious. So then you say, well, Ron, you can block them, right? The answer is no, I really can't. I can block what I can block, but there's an infinite number of them. So what you've done is and this is what I think, all things considered, the free speech changes that Elon Musk made on X get an 8 out of 10.
Okay.
Immensely better, because people are not being banned for being conservatives or for even being hateful. But what is clear is that you can absolutely destroy the ability of people to have the kind of experience on the platform that the platform wants its users to have. Now, how to tune that is definitely the choice of the owner of the platform. I don't want to say there's no serious argument to the contrary. There are people who take the position that this is really a public forum in the year 2025, and it should, under constitutional law, be treated as a public forum. I don't think that's ever going to carry the day. It could, but maybe it will. But I do think that a person can say, as I have, two things. One is, I think Twitter is allowing the experience of being, or X, is allowing the experience of being a prominent X user. Like Ron Coleman, I get my way to a large extent on X. I don't get much of a monetary payout because I'm not doing it right. I don't have big enough breasts. I don't know what it is.
I think it's principle. If you operate on principle,
okay. And
if you're not going to chase whatever the dragon is that allows you to get paid,
right. I've never been. If I were any good at that, I would be retired by now.
That's what I heard about you. Yeah.
All right. So I don't really have any major complaints, but there's no question that they have allowed a level of anti-Semitism infect the experience on Twitter in a way that not only degrades my experience, but is absolutely societally damaging. It is hurting us, because this goes back to our original discussion.
Yeah, flesh that out a little bit.
We're hearing more from more creeps. And it may not be more creeps. It could be 10 people with server farms or with bot farms, okay? But the effect is, because our brains are treating these messages, it's impossible for us, not at least viscerally, to treat each reply as it's got a face attached to it, or a dog, usually a dog. But
usually a dog, yeah. A lot of cartoons are dogs.
But it seems to be a person, and it seems to be speaking for a person. And what we learned actually a few months ago was that there was a very large operation that was paid for by, was it Act Blue or was it the guys who shut down Media Matters, to swarm social media, and especially Twitter, with bots to move the Overton window on a lot of to give people a different impression of what everybody says and everybody believes. That's societally so. All right, bot issue is related but not the same. But what we have seen on X is a normalization of hate, so that people like Jake Shields and this guy Christensen, who's the hot thing now.
Who's Jake Shields, just so people understand?
He's a guy, I don't really know who he is. He's a prominent anti-Semite on X.
He's a MMA fighter, is he not? Isn't that
he wasn't? I think he was a mediocre MMA fighter.
Okay.
And also like Dan Bilzerian, a guy who was famous for nothing.
I thought he was famous for being rich, wasn't he?
Famous for being the son of a rich person who was used by his father as a way to launder part of his stolen money.
Perfect.
And Bilzerian lost almost all the money. So what these failures in life frequently do, Stu Peters, is they turn to anti-Semitism because it's a way to get lots of followers. Now, we don't know where these followers really are from, how many of them are Americans, how many of them are Pakistanis, we don't really know. Nonetheless, again, as human beings operating in a simulated community, we think there's all this hatred out there, and we also think that that the line for what passes as normal discourse and accepted statements has moved, so that even my friend Jack Posobiec.
Do you know him in real life?
I know him in real life. We have each other's cell numbers. We've met several times. We've had lunch together. That's how much I know him in real life.
Okay, yeah, no, but
I never slept on his couch.
Okay, but it's relevant. You know, I have had people say, Kyle Seraphin is my friend, and I go, oh, we've never really met. That's a weird thing to have.
Well, you and I have never met, but I do feel like we're friends.
I would agree. Yeah, I would say that. But I wouldn't say that about everybody that I talk to.
Multiple hour-long conversations.
That's right.
And we've also communicated many times personally in DMs, making fun of all the other dumb people who are not as great as us.
That's correct.
But Jack is a friend, and
good.
We do talk. And yet yesterday he saw fit to tweet. I'm going to still call it tweeting. To tweet. Yeah. Today's the 86th, not the 56th anniversary of the attack on the USS Liberty. The fuck, Jack? What are you accomplishing with that? Why was that necessary? And I'm not happy with it.
And not with there's no context to it. It's just the. Listen, that used to be
you don't need the context.
No, not on the internet. I agree with you, but it wasn't saying like historically this is relevant because of this thing, and I want people to be aware that this was a great information op. This was a thing that happened. No, you just said
it was out of context, and there's look, many people believe that Jack is an anti-Semite. I am not that concerned about whether someone is an anti-Semite because it's really none of my business. If someone treats me decently and doesn't do any harm to other people, I don't really care what his internal views are about me or groups or because if you knew as many Jews as I do, you'd be an anti-Semite also.
That might be the line of the day,
especially my family. So, I did a whole thread on that. I don't care. Just be a civil person. And I think Jack's a great American, by the way.
I would agree with you because listen, for whatever happens online, and for some reason you and I spend way too much time there, so it becomes it's interesting. I rarely talk about it with people outside of my wife and maybe with you. So we have this sort of this weird experience of it. And why I know it's not real, although it does absolutely feel real when you feel like, quote unquote, attacked or people say nasty things about you. As you said, our brain is not able to interpret that that's probably a phone that is sitting on a bank of wall phones that some a-hole who barely speaks English is out there tapping away on and saying awful things. And that may very well be true behind the picture of a cat or a dog or a cartoon character or a Batman symbol or whatever it is. And you go like, yeah, intellectually I know that, but emotionally it feels like some awful human beings out there saying the worst thing about me all the time. And I hate it. But I also know that nobody does that to my face, and I don't think they often will do it to your face, which makes me know that there is a big difference between the real world. I actually had this conversation with Sean Ryan right when things were getting crazy at the beginning of the year. And there was a Tesla that blew up in front of Trump Tower and some other things.
Yeah.
And Sean reached out to me, and he's obviously very prominent. He gets a lot of hate and love and all the things you get when you're online and prominent. And he's got a bigger profile than either one of us. And he called me for advice, which was really interesting because we'd never spoken before. So I think I like it when people that I don't know call me up and ask me what I think about something, and I don't know what the answer is before they answer. Like, he goes, is the FBI going to come after me? And I go, I don't think so. No, based on I know about the FBI, so I'll give you that opinion. And then he said, he asked me a couple other questions, and he just said, I'm really, really concerned. And I said, Sean, not knowing him at all, never having met the guy, just on the phone and watching his podcast, I said, right now you're in the retard vortex. And there's no other way to explain it. That's what we're in right now. And I'm going to remind you that anytime you want, you can put your phone in a Faraday bag and you can walk out and hug your kid. And I would recommend you do that for this weekend, because there's nothing for you here except just swirling, retards. There's mean, ugly sentiment everywhere, unlimited amounts of it, as you mentioned. So just get out of the pool for a little while. You can step back in tomorrow, you can step back in on Monday, whatever, but just take some time. And he did, to his credit. And I think all of us should probably remember that too. But it doesn't make it feel like there's not people that are awful. I'll come down and look beaten, and my wife just looks at me and goes like, are you okay? And I go, yeah, I'm just surrounded by really awful people. Right, and you're right, it takes away from the experience.
But not only the experience, I mean, look at the college campuses and look what's happening in Los Angeles.
Right. It's more real for them. They don't have a real life they can walk into the way you and I do. I don't think. I think their real life and their online life are blended, and they are one.
And this is a real change that's taken place in our lives during the time that you and I have been, adults. Mm-hmm. And we've had to adjust to it, and you and I have adjusted to it phenomenally well, because we have lots of people who like to hear what we have to say, and that gives you, everyone wants to be heard. So people like you and I really want to be heard, are able to get people to listen to us, and it's great. But, many have observed as well that, on the other hand, it's a little bit like the old saw about 8 million, New York City being a city of 8 million lonely people.
Yes. And
everyone's on the internet. And at the same time, we're more alienated from each other and in many respects isolated than, we were when we mostly just knew the people that we knew. Who knows?
There has to be some kind of a swing. One of my friends is not college educated and yet one of the brightest people, as often is the case. And he referred to our time right now as a digital dark age, where we have technologies, unlike the dark age where people had technologies from a previous civilization and didn't know what to do with them or didn't know how to repair them. We now have technologies from our future civilization, and we haven't figured out how to use them yet, I feel like. And I think he might be right.
He might be right, but I will tell you, the last couple of days I've seen a number of pushback posts regarding AI from people in a position to know, people who are highly intelligent and highly knowledgeable, saying we're really being fed a bill of goods about AI. It will never truly be what we recognize as human intelligence, much less exceed it, because it's just modeling. It's just simulation. It lacks consciousness. It lacks true creativity. And even there's data, and this data, I think, was particularly related to the work of an AI being done by Apple, which is not a leader. Mm-hmm. But that they have found that the bigger the problems get, the worse AI gets at being accurate about results. And the more confused it gets, because the model doesn't scale.
It doesn't know how to weigh the value of certain sources the way that a human being would. I have to imagine that's true, because go query about yourself and find out all the interesting things that AI believes about you.
First of all, Grok is absolutely determined that I'm an African American.
Well, we cannot disprove that. I've seen an African American Ron Coleman. There is, in fact, a dark-skinned Ron Coleman.
There is. Well, I think there may be more dark-skinned Ron Colemans than there are light-skinned Ron Colemans. But when I say to Grok, I'm Ron Coleman, at Ron Coleman, make a picture of the lawyer Ron Coleman with the account Ron Coleman, okay, in a sailor suit.
Yes.
Grok can't figure out that I mean me.
Yes.
I
love that though. I got a lot of black Kyle Serafins for a while too, because the most
you're
prominent
sitting in the dark. I told you.
The most prominent Serafin was Kevin Serafin, who incidentally, I believe, played for the Nets. So
And
that was
he,
the
in
thing.
fact, that's the guy your father-in-law saw.
That's
on
who my
the street.
father-in-law thought had no opportunity in America. And now the AI bots want to just draw my picture as that man, which is he had an opportunity. His opportunity was to be my doppelganger. He just didn't realize it.
Well, I think we've exhausted nothing. No, these subjects are not exhausted. These are hard.
They never go anywhere. What do you make of people taking? It seemed like we were able to have some pretty healthy debate in my lifetime, and I didn't see very much political rioting and I saw a riot that happened in '92 with Rodney King, and I think that was very telling as a young person. I saw that, but I haven't really seen wide-scale rioting right up until 2020. That was maybe the next time that I saw that. What do you make of that happening now as a guy who kind of does advocating on behalf of speech? Because
this has nothing to do with speech.
Clearly not, but it is an outlet that people are trying to express something. Would you agree? Or do you not even think that?
I think that it is predominantly a performance designed to simulate the expression of opinion, just like those Act Blue or Media Matters bot farms. It is very clear there is a lot of evidence, not only indirect evidence, but direct evidence, that both the 2020 riots and the riots in LA now have been coordinated and funded by groups and entities with an interest in harming American society. And they use, just as they use the free speech regime of Twitter, they use the free speech regime of the American tradition of legal street demonstrations to shield themselves from the effects of their violence, so that you have an entire political party that will, and an entire media cadre that will look you right in the eye in front of a row of burning buildings and say, this is a mostly peaceful demonstration. And say, Trump, don't send your military help here. We've got the LAPD handling everything, while at the same time people are throwing cinder blocks on top of LAPD cars, and the cops are scrambling underneath the underpasses.
Right.
That has nothing to do with speech, nothing. But because the Democrats have made these political and symbolic choices so that anything that can possibly be construed, and they know that we know that they're lying, that we know that it's not an expression, much less a sincere and authentic expression of opinion, but that it's rather a show. The answer is it has nothing to do with free speech whatsoever. It is, and in fact, it is so corrosive to free speech because of the way it abuses it and leverages it against the values of the very society that free speech is meant to encourage. That unless and until we have a political class that is prepared to acknowledge these truths, we are in for very, very rocky times ahead.
Well, I do like that you drew the parallel between the online bot farms and the in real life bot farms, which are these people that are seeding this thing. They used to call it astroturfing,
right?
But they would use it for different types of things. But this is an astroturf. In other words, it is not grassroots. It is fake grass. and it's made up grass. And so they're, like you said, they're using the vestiges of free speech to simulate speech, but it's obviously not speech, and it's more performative. How sad for us. I did hear the fiery but mostly peaceful line of this year's version. I already heard it. It was on ABC 7. And the statement was, the law enforcement must be very cautious when they go to engage with people because they don't want to upset the balance. It might just be that there are people who enjoy surrounding burning cars, and you don't want to upset them by coming in too heavy-handedly. And he said it a little bit more eloquently, or maybe a little bit shorter to the point, but the effect was, some people just burn cars for fun, Ron, and you really don't want to upset those people in America now, do you?
No, that's where we are. I mean, just so many things are so out of whack.
What a wild statement from a newscaster.
But you know, Kyle, as you pointed out, you go home for the weekend. In my case, you would at least have one day of Sabbath rest where you turn it all off and you're dealing entirely with real people and the Lord, and you and your family just might get through it if you will touch grass, as they say. And it's never been more important because there's so much else going out there that is so determined to get you off track. So keep doing what you're doing.
We're going to keep doing that. As a last thought, do you think a solution to some of this ridiculousness is dressing like a grown-up?
Yeah, I do. I think a lot of the things that we see people do, they wouldn't dream of doing, either because they would feel silly because they would recognize that they're acting out of place, but also the good self-regard that comes, the healthy self-regard that comes from looking like a mensch and dressing like a mensch, is contagious to your entire psyche.
I do act differently when I'm wearing a suit, I feel like.
Think about it.
There's something to that. And maybe that's the lesson that these, I know that other people also act like they are at a slumber party on an airplane when they show up in their pajamas.
It is just unbelievable how people go around now. And even over the last 20 years, I mean, you know, we can't compare things with the 1950s. That's just ridiculous. But even in the last 20 years, I mean, I used to go onto a plane and there would be a few business people on there dressed for business. And now it's just like riding the subway, you know.
But not the subway at any hour of the day. The subway at 2 a.m. when the bars have let out.
With the people who live on that subway.
Yes, with people who are actually inhabitants, and you are a visitor in their home, in the atrium that is their home.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't want to put too much on it, but I will tell you that if you could change one seemingly, one seemingly isolated thing about our society without making anyone, without imprisoning anyone or executing anyone, but just that everyone's going to have to dress as if they were going to a job interview in 1986.
And that starts with every individual person, because people will treat you differently when you dress. Do people treat you differently than the hobos that are walking around out in the street?
No, they do. I mean, but let's face it. There's a certain aura. I mean, I have total strangers. The guys in front of Quick Check, okay, who live in front of Quick Check.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Lawyer, I get out of my car. Okay, I'm going to get a slushy. Hey, lawyer. They can just tell, okay? So you can't use me as an example.
You just exude lawyerness, legal scholarliness.
Well, down south, I exude rabbiness, but yeah, it's essentially the same thing anyway.
That's fair. I love it. Ron, tell people about the Culmination.
Culmination is my podcast. It doesn't go every day, such as Kyle's does, but it goes every couple of weeks, which is just about right for someone who has a real job. And
it's true.
You know, it supposedly is about free speech, but it's whatever interests me. It has my name in it, so just whatever I want to do. And you can find it at coleman-nation.com. But if you just look up roncoleman.com, you'll find me in everything I'm about, and it will enable you to proactively avoid me as well, if that's what you want to do after listening to this. It's a free country. I want to make your experience as pleasant as possible online too.
That is very thoughtful and courteous of you. Good on you. We will put your link in the show description for people who want to send you nice messages only on X. They have to be flattering or at least amusingly, constructively sarcastic.
Listen, I just dropped today an episode, a new podcast episode of Culmination.
I saw it.
And my guest is Andrew Branca, Law of Self-Defense, who once blocked me on Twitter. Okay,
he has some really, really nasty things to say sometimes.
Yeah, he does, and I must have tripped over one of them, and yet we became pretty friendly. So I'm not afraid of nasty comments, but I guess there's a level of nasty that
there has to be some value added.
No, there is. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks for having me. Great talking to you again, Kyle.
I enjoyed it. Thanks, Ron.
And that, my dear friends, is the Sunday Sit Down. It was brought to you by My Patriot Supply. Check them out at mypatriotsupply.com/KYLE for that 4th of July preparedness option bundle. If you guys are looking for all their sale options, it's there too. I hope you enjoyed that. I hope there was some fun there for you. It was a very fun time for me. I loved talking to Ron. It's just, when I say he's one of my favorite people that I've met in the social media sphere, I'm not exaggerating. Thanks for being part of the program, and make sure you have liked it. If you get a chance, make sure you're doing that over at rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. If you're watching there, give us a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel. We just crossed the threshold, 27,000 users strong and growing. Same thing over on YouTube. We crossed the 10,000 follower mark. We'd really love it if you guys would subscribe. It's youtube.com/@Kyle Seraphin. And if you want to support us financially and you want to do so directly, you can join the community with KyleSeraphin.com. That's our locals channel. Now, yeah, you don't have to necessarily pay to be on it. You can just join the conversation. There's a lot of free options there as well. We also stream the show there every day. And then lastly, and not least, if you are looking for this to take with you and you want the option of audio or video, a podcast that you could take or watch, listen or watch, yeah, you can do that at KyleSeraphinShow.com. That is a hyperlink that will get you directly to our Spotify channel. And we've got more and more people growing every sort of week. I see maybe a couple thousand more people are kind of popping in over the month. So check us out over there, KyleSeraphinShow.com. And it's an easy way to share it with a friend. Like, share it, subscribe, leave me a comment either on Apple or on Spotify and so on. You can do so. You can do a question, a comment, or a sarcastic remark. All are equally good. I'll end with a little thought here. This is another thing. Some people want to just send us something in writing. If you want to put something on pen to paper, postcard, letter, your favorite barbecue recipes, hate mail, no live animals, check us out. There's an option to send it to the P.O. Box, which is 9073 West State Highway 29. 9073 West State Highway 29. It's Box 509 at Suite 110. So Suite 110, Box 509, Liberty Hill, Texas, 78642. Liberty Hill is a good hill to die on. It's a good thing to talk about when we're talking about those civil liberties, which we did today. Hope you join us for the regular Kyle Seraphin show, which does air 0930 Eastern Time, 8:30 in Texas, America, 5 days a week. And we'll start with show 601 on Monday. God bless all of you. Thanks for making us a success that we are. Most podcasts never make it past 8 episodes. We are crushing it over here, and it's because of you. So thank God for you, and God bless you. I look forward to seeing you on the other side of this weekend. Have a great one.
Thank you for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram @Kyle Seraphin.